In the first 48 hours after a security incident, most organizations discover the same uncomfortable thing. The incident response plan exists. The annual training completion report exists. The spreadsheet with everyone's name on it exists, because no compliance process is complete until a spreadsheet has been given a ceremonial hat and asked to pretend it is governance. But the actual learning system is missing. People are trying to work out what happened, who needs to know, what evidence must be kept, which vendor owns which bit, what the regulator may ask for, and whether the board pack can safely say the word contained without creating a hostage situation for next week's update. That is the moment when training matters, not 3 months later, not in the next annual refresh, not after the incident has become a 2-line example in a generic module that looks like it was assembled by a committee that had only recently been introduced to the internet. The point of the 48-hour rule is simple. Training lands best when it is attached to a real event, a real role, and a real decision window. If an incident has just happened, people are paying attention. The board is paying attention. IT is paying attention. Compliance is paying attention. Vendor owners are suddenly discovering the beauty of documentation. The organization is awake. The question is whether that attention becomes evidence, behavior change, and readiness, or whether it evaporates into the usual folder called lessons learned, which is often less a folder and more a filing cabinet for institutional optimism. Here is the process. Step 1. Define the trigger. A trigger is not something bad happens somewhere. That creates noise. A trigger is a specific event type that maps to your organization's risk surface, a supplier breach, a ransomware disclosure in your sector, a credential stuffing campaign, a regulator statement, a vulnerability being actively exploited in software you actually use. The trigger has to answer one question. Why should our people care about this now? If the answer is vague, do not train yet. You are about to send another piece of corporate wallpaper. Step 2. Map the audience. The board does not need the same lesson as the service desk. The service desk does not need the same lesson as procurement. Procurement does not need the same lesson as the person who owns the supplier register and has just realized that strategic partner is not a control. This is where most training breaks. It says all staff because all staff is convenient. It is also how you create content that is relevant to nobody in particular. The 48-hour rule works because the lesson changes by role. For the board, the lesson might be about escalation thresholds and evidence language. For IT, it might be about containment, identity, and logging. For compliance, it might be about regulator-ready chronology. For vendor owners, it might be about notification obligations, contractual access, and who is allowed to use the phrase, "We are awaiting an update from the supplier," without being gently removed from the meeting. Step 3. Turn the incident into one clear decision. Good training is not a documentary. It is a rehearsal. The learner should finish with one decision they would make differently next time. Do I escalate this? Do I preserve this evidence? Do I contact this vendor? Do I tell the customer team now? Do I wait for perfect information? Or do I record what we know and update it later? When training is built around a decision, it becomes operational. When it is built around awareness, it becomes a polite screensaver. Step 4. Capture acknowledgement and proof during the response. This is the audit point. Many organizations try to reconstruct evidence after the incident. That is backwards. If training happens inside the response window, evidence should be created inside the response window as well. Who received the lesson? Which role group were they in? What did they acknowledge? What did they get wrong? What exception was raised? What remediation was assigned? That record is not admin. It is the difference between saying, "We trained people," and showing how the organization improved while the risk was live. Step 5. Score the system, not the mood. After an incident, the room is full of emotion, urgency, relief, blame avoidance. The familiar low-grade theatre of executives asking for a single source of truth, while 12 documents reproduce in SharePoint like damp. You cannot manage readiness by mood. You need to score it. The useful score is not just, did people complete the intervention? Completion is the weakest possible proof. It tells you that a box was ticked. It does not tell you whether the right people learned the right thing at the right moment. A readiness score should show whether the right triggers are wired, whether the right audiences are mapped, whether training is role-specific, whether acknowledgements and exceptions are captured, whether remediation is assigned, whether leaders can see the gap before the regulator, customer, or insurer does. That is the production system. Trigger, audience, decision, evidence, score. Most organizations already have fragments of this. They have a policy, they have annual training, they have incident response, they have supplier management, they have compliance reporting. The problem is that the fragments often behave like separate departments at a railway station, each with a clipboard, none of them certain where the train is. The 48-hour rule is the connection between them. The incident creates attention. The role-specific lesson turns attention into behaviour. The evidence chain turns behaviour into proof. The readiness score turns proof into a management decision. That is why this is not a slogan. A slogan is easy to remember and hard to operate. A production system is less glamorous. It has inputs, owners, deadlines, exceptions, and records. It is the difference between "we care about cyberculture" and "when this happened, these people learned this, these exceptions appeared, and this is what changed next." That is the standard a regulated organization should be aiming for. Not training because the calendar says so. Training because the incident made the lesson real. If you want to test whether your current incident training system can do that, use the Cyber Incident Readiness Assessment linked in the description. It scores the operating gaps, triggers, audience mapping, evidence, ownership, and response readiness. The first 48 hours after an incident do not create a new organization. They reveal the one you already built.